y en un abrazo sincero, un abrazo colombiano. Todo el que llega a esta tierra lo tratamos como hermano.
This is Les Williams from the Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service. This webinar, titled Colombia, Familiarization to Export, is one of 6 country-specific webinars hosted by the U.S. Commercial Service St. Louis office, giving you a general overview of doing business in each country. The St. Louis office is one of over 100 domestic offices, in addition to another 100-plus offices in 80 different countries. Our mission is to help U.S. companies by providing export counseling and assist with finding qualified agents and distributors overseas. If you aren't working with your local U.S. commercial service, set up a meeting to discuss your company's goals overseas and how the organization may be able to assist. You can find us at www.export.gov. We will have 2 speakers for today's webinar, Margaret Gottlieb and Cameron Werker, the main speaker of this event. First, we'll introduce Margaret Gottlieb. She has been an international trade specialist with the Commercial Service since 1997. She will take just a few minutes to give us an overview of the Commercial Service itself and its benefits to the export partners. Margaret?
Thank you, Les, and thank you all for joining us this morning for our webinar on Colombia, and I hope you will find it both interesting and informative for your export endeavors there. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the U.S. Commercial Service and how we might be able to help you. There are over 100 offices here in the U.S. and also many offices throughout the world where we help you to protect and promote American business interests all over the world. We do that with our commercial officers who are Americans listed at our embassies and consulates, and their staff of industry specialists called commercial specialists that are helping us to help you to enter into the foreign markets all over the world. We do that through counseling, market intelligence, matchmaking, and commercial diplomacy. We actually, on the domestic side, meet with your company, see what you're doing here, what your goals are overseas, and then we try to help you to know what you don't know before you don't know it so that you can have a successful business transaction overseas. And really, every company is a case-by-case basis. And we work with our staff overseas to get you the information that you need and try to find partners that you need and make you aware of things that you may have to change for your product or register your product with a particular body, such as an electrical or medical type of product, or anything that you might need to do to have that successful sale. And it brings a lot of good for you as an American business, strengthening your business because the more that you sell, and in our case, we assist you to sell overseas, we help our U.S. economy, and that helps us to create and sustain jobs for people in the United States. This is our U.S. Exporter Verification of Successful Outcome form. When we work with you, one of the things that we definitely ask of you is, and we'll send this form to you periodically, is if you have made a sale or signed a distributor which our office or our office overseas has helped you in part to make that sale or sign that distributor, we ask that you fill out this form, because that's one way that we can measure if we are helping you, and these results are kind of calculated and given to Congress in aggregate so that we can remain funded. So we really ask that you help us to do this. And now I'm going to turn it over back to Les to introduce our featured speaker.
Cameron Werker is currently serving as the Senior Commercial Officer for the U.S. Department of Commerce Foreign Commercial Service in Bogota, Colombia. His vast experience includes tours in Belgrade and Beijing, as well as domestically in Boston. He has also worked as the marketing manager of an Indian agricultural company in New Delhi, India, as well as a trade analyst at the International Trade Commission in Washington, D.C. I would like to thank Mr. Werker for taking the time to join us today and share his expertise. Cameron?
Thanks, Les. Thanks, Margaret. Hello, everybody. I hope it's a good day in St. Louis. It's a somewhat cloudy day in Bogota, but that's about the norm. So one disadvantage of the webinar and the phone is if I ask how many people have been doing business in Colombia, I really can't see if you're raising your hand or not. So for those of you that are doing business in Colombia, some of this may be a little bit old information. For some of you that are thinking about Colombia, it will be new information. We will start off by doing a little bit of an overview of the country as general, a little bit on the political situation, a little bit on the economic situation, obviously on commercial situation, best prospects. We'll talk about the free trade agreement that was implemented just over 1 year ago. And then we'll talk about some best practices for just doing business in general in Colombia, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So without further ado, I'm clicking the slides. There might be a little bit of delay, so now I'm just kind of stalling till the next slide comes up. But in the meantime, you can see pretty pictures of Colombia. The one on the left, my favorite place probably in Colombia, in an area called Pasto. This looks like seen out of the latest Sherlock Holmes movie, if you saw that. But we do have a wide diversity in terms of geographic location. I was telling my colleagues earlier that Bogota actually sits at almost 9,000 feet, so we're the third highest capital in the world. Colombia itself has a population of about 48 million people, which makes it the third largest market for you in Latin America after Brazil and Mexico. One of the unique aspects of Colombia, in my opinion, is that there are 5 cities in Colombia that have populations over 1 million people. No country in Latin America other than Brazil and Mexico has that advantage. And the meaning is, as a U.S. exporter, you don't have to just concentrate on the capital city of Bogota. There are 3 million people in the city of Medellin, which was just voted the most innovative city in the world, beating out New York and Tel Aviv. A lot of U.S. investment going in there from Kimberly-Clark and Hewlett-Packard to others. Cities on the north coast like Barranquilla and Cartagena, and then the city of Cali. So again, very unique situation in Colombia vis-a-vis the rest of Latin America, in that you have a wide range of cities in which you can target. The country is small enough that you can have one agent, representative, distributor that can represent you in the entire country. The longest flight is about an hour and a half between Bogota and any of the other large cities. Or if you choose, you can have different reps, agents, distributors in different areas. So you have that flexibility. The one thing I would note, even though literacy rate is very high, in Colombia, English proficiency is very low. I put the statistic on there to show you how low. It's 50 out of 54, Libya being 54. So Latin America in general is fairly low in terms of English proficiency, and Colombia is even low on that scale. And that's just to say, do not take it for granted that your partners, your clients, will speak English. So be prepared to translate your materials, and we'll speak about this at the very end of the presentation, into English, or have somebody on staff that might be able to communicate in Spanish, translate into Spanish, and have somebody that can communicate in Spanish, because, like I said, just don't take it for granted that they will speak English. More young people are studying English, but it's slow in coming. From a political overview, I think it's safe to say that Colombia is one of the United States' best strategic partners in the entire region. We, of course, have a new free trade agreement that we implemented on May 15th of 2012, so it's been just over a year. But politically, very stable. We've got elections coming up next year here in Colombia. The incumbent, President Santos, likely will be reelected. And the big thing on the table now are peace talks. The Colombians, unfortunately, have been on the receiving end of one of the longest internal conflicts in the world, a 50-year-plus war with the Counter-Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, better known as the FARC, and they are currently in formal peace negotiations in Havana, Cuba. So depending on the outcome of those negotiations, really could see a revolutionary change in this country in terms of its openness. I will say that the country has experienced nothing short of a revolutionary change already in the last 10 years. The national safety and security situation in Colombia, probably as opposed to what media in the United States may report, has improved drastically. Travel around the country to the major cities is not a problem. I travel extensively. I've not had any problem. Probably the biggest issue that companies and visitors to Colombia have to the major cities is petty crime. In fact, the crime rate in Bogota is on par with New Orleans and Philadelphia. If you're traveling to those cities, you will not have a problem traveling to Colombia. I'd say that there's no doubt that Colombia suffers more from the perceptions of the past than the realities of the present. And that is important for you as U.S. businesses to realize that Colombia is not only, like I said, the third largest market for you in all of Latin America, but that one is very welcoming to U.S. products and services, and one that has continued to become a safer environment to do business. This next graphic, I think if you add up the numbers, you'll see that over 70% of the population in Colombia is between 20 and 40 years old. That is a substantial consumer base for you and the products and services that you hope to sell to Colombia. As opposed to a country like Japan with an aging population, you can see that Colombia has the perfect demographic for the majority of U.S. goods and services, with average age being 28%. It's also important to note that the middle class makes up over a third of the country, and that middle class has actually doubled in the last 10 years. So I've got the cursory charts and graphs, a couple slides forthcoming where you'll see the per capita income and the increase that it's had over the years. So again, this little title, Why an Economic Miracle, may be a bit of a stretch, but the Wall Street Journal calls Colombia and Peru the Latin American tigers, just as Vietnam, Indonesia were called the Asian tigers 10 years ago. President Obama has included it in his list of the top 12 next-tier markets after Brazil, China, India, and Russia. So they're in a group, say, with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, South Africa. So Colombia's right up there. Strong GDP growth over the last several years, as you can see, 5.9% in 2011, 4% in 2012. Major share in the extractive industries, mining in particular. And I would say in general, you've got three major best prospects in Colombia, and one of them does include the extractive industries, oil, gas, so goods or services sold in those industries, mining. If you can move earth in Colombia, you're going to make money. And the second one is military procurement. And the third one is transportation infrastructure. Second bullet from the bottom, you can see $26 billion over the next 4 years in transportation infrastructure contracts alone. And that does not include what the government's trying to do in terms of public-private partnership. So we actually just had the Secretary of Commerce lead a 20-company trade mission on the one-year anniversary of the free trade agreement. So that would be March 15th of 2013, just last month. And again, those companies were really focused on trying to sell into airport modifications, road constructions, port developments, across the board on transportation infrastructure. So again, the big three: extractive industries, military, and transportation infrastructure. You can see significant increases in foreign direct investment. I'm not going to read the numbers to you, but again, this is just illustrative of how quickly Colombia is opening to the world. The United States is still the largest foreign direct investor in Colombia. Like I said, a lot of U.S. companies with a presence here, either investment or with sales offices. So again, it's not the Colombia of the past. This is definitely Colombia of the present and future. A lot going on and a lot of opportunities. So I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint presentations. You don't have much choice but to give one, and you can't give a PowerPoint presentation without the requisite graph. I think I have two. This first one just shows you how stable Colombia really has been in terms of economic growth. They've only had 1 year of negative growth since 1991. If you compare that to other countries, say like the United States, I think we'd be very jealous of this kind of growth. So again, very impressive, very stable fiscally, good sound fiscal policy, which allows the country to spend so much now on transportation infrastructure. And I guess I would just say the reason why they're spending so much on transportation infrastructure now is not only because the country needs it, but it's because they're spending less on defense, internal defense. Because the situation has improved so much with the FARC, the paramilitaries, and narco-traffickers, the country is finally being able to allocate more of its federal resources to improving social issues like transportation infrastructure, education, and health. Here's the GDP growth that I spoke about earlier, 2016, projected to be almost $9,000 per capita. So again, rising middle class, greater buying power, all are signals for good opportunities for U.S. companies selling goods and services to Colombia. Here's just a little pie chart. It shows the majority of investment coming into Colombia is in the extractive industries, over 50%, but we're starting to see some diversification. It's just some examples here of some of the infrastructure projects. As I said, oil and gas is big. 2 oil refinery modernization projects going on. Port development is big. Like I said, infrastructure. 5 airport concessions will be going out for tender for modernization programs around the country. And tourism is growing. A lot of new hotel starts, a lot of new rooms, both in Bogota and the North Coast, Cartagena. If anybody ever saw Romancing the Stone, you know Cartagena. So still Colombia's #1 tourist attraction, and a lot of hotel development going there. Again, I'm not going to go through this too much in terms of some of the projects. Again, this presentation will be available to you. But again, it's just illustrative of what's going on in the country in terms of investment. Wow, look at that. That's not great. Okay, sorry about that slide. If we have any IT companies in the audience, as you can see, only about 20% of all homes have internet access, but if you look at the major cities, that penetration rate is much, much higher. There is a major income divide within Colombia, within the 5 major cities, very high. In some of the more rural areas, in the jungle in the southeast, on the west coast, very, very poor areas. So 20%, while it seems low, is much higher in the areas in which you would be accessing. We've got tenders out for 4G, mobile operators. Again, just a lot of improvements in tech. So we're seeing, in terms of that next tier after the big 3 best prospects that I mentioned, and I'll show you in a little bit some of the specific next tier best prospects, but certainly information communication technologies is at the top of that 2nd tier list. So it's not all rosy. I don't want you to think that I'm here to sell you on Colombia. I'm really here just to open your eyes to Colombia. Colombia is an emerging market, and with emerging markets you have situations that you have around the world. On the economic side, you do have a large informal economy in Colombia that the Colombian Customs is trying to deal with. A lot of red tape and bureaucracy, especially when dealing with government contracts. I would also say that the last thing you want to do is find yourself in court anywhere in the world, but certainly not in Colombia. The judiciary process is remarkably slow. I would even say painful. My tip to you, and this is in the slide later, is that for any contracts you have with major clients, major partners, that you include as first step of dispute resolution, mediation or arbitration. You just don't want to default to going to court, A, because of the cost, but B, because of the time. Credit, Colombian SMEs do have a difficult time getting credit from Colombian banks. We do have multinational banks. Citibank is here, for example. I just was around for a week with the Export-Import Bank here in Colombia. Colombia is actually their second biggest market in all of Latin America after Mexico. About $3 billion in exposure in Colombia, so they are very active working with potentially your clients, provide them loan guarantees and loans. Those loans from the Export-Import Bank require 80% U.S. content, so it's a great deal for you as a U.S. exporter of goods. I mentioned the need to improve transportation infrastructure. Yeah, it is a problem here. Second highest inland transportation costs in all of South America after Brazil. You can see my little World Bank stat there. $94 to ship a ton of cargo from Shanghai to Cartagena. $94 to get it from Cartagena to Bogota. So again, this is important for you to know if you're exporting goods in terms of the terms that you're going to provide your customers. If you are providing delivered prices, obviously you want to be very aware of what your inland transportation costs could be. You also want to be cognizant what those costs could be for your customers if you're shipping ex-factory or FOB or something that is not a delivered price. You need to be aware that they are incurring high costs, which could affect your ultimate retail price, depending on who your ultimate customer is. So like I said, May 15th, 2012 was a fairly historic period of time for Colombia-U.S. relations. That was the implementation date of the Free Trade Agreement. The Free Trade Agreement was announced in this picture in April of 2012 at the Summit of Americas, where every president in the Western Hemisphere, sans three, came to Cartagena for a summit. I suspect that if anybody in the audience is aware of the Summit of Americas, you're probably only aware of it because of the Secret Service scandal. But I can assure you that the summit was very productive for other reasons. A, the Free Trade Agreement announcement, but B, the United States government granted Colombians 10-year visa validity. Also important for you to know if you're doing business in Colombia, because now your partners or your clients and customers, when they receive a visa, it's good for 10 years, which means they can visit you on an unlimited basis for that 10-year period of time before they have to renew it. That's a significant improvement in the relations. The next step after that is visa waiver. So they really are at the top of the food chain in terms of getting visas. So again, just some stats on the Free Trade Agreement. I like to point out, we've talked a lot about the export of goods. It's very important to realize that we have any service exporters in the audience. Colombia's service market is estimated at $166 billion. This is a massive market. It's important to know that the Colombians prefer to buy American. They see the help that the U.S. government and companies have given them to improve their lives, and I'm talking about the improvement in the national safety and security situation, and they literally equate that to products they buy on the shelves. There is a preference to buy American. They realize the value proposition, but please don't be stupid. The Colombians aren't stupid. They will buy the cheap Chinese products that we as Americans buy all the time. So again, it's something that you need to take advantage of, but don't take it for granted. All right. We're not the only ones that have a free trade agreement with Colombia. The Canadians implemented their free trade agreement in April of 2012, which beat us to the punch. And it had a fairly immediate impact on U.S. exports of corn. It's more or less a commodity, and the Canadians snapped up the market. Why would you buy more expensive corn when you can buy it cheaper from the Canadians? So it has been very difficult for us to win that market share back. I'm happy to be representing not the agricultural industry, but goods and services. And again, where I think we have a very strong competitive advantage, this free trade agreement is huge. But they will ratify one with the European Union in 2013. Actually, it was ratified in 2012, but it has to be passed by the respective Congresses, which I suspect will be done this year. So they are reaching out far and wide. This country is open for business. It's important to note that with the FTA, again, 1 year into it, On May 15, 2012, 80% of all U.S. products had their duties dropped, eliminated, zero duty. Average duty on U.S. products coming into Colombia was about 14% before May 15, 2012. Your products just got 14 to 15% more cost competitive against your competitors from non-FTA countries like China, like India, today like the European Union. And again, the remaining 20% will have their duties eliminated on a step program, meaning they were reduced every year between 1 and 17 years. I doubt there are any rice exporters in the audience, so you don't have to worry about the 17 years. The majority of them are between 1 and 5 years before they go to zero. So again, a huge impact, a huge cost advantage for you as a U.S. exporter. Of course, you have to have U.S. content. You can't just buy from China and re-export it to Colombia. That doesn't count. You do have to have a product that is majority originated in the United States. So again, here's some of the best prospects in the second tier that I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to read the list, but you can see for yourself over 75% fall within these industries. So again, if you are a company within these industries, you have a very high likelihood of success in Colombia. It has gotten more competitive as Colombia has opened up to more countries with more free trade agreements. We are seeing a lot more foreign competition for our U.S. companies, but again, to get in here now is a good opportunity. Establish a partnership arrangement, distributor, agent, representative, whatever it takes. As long as you have boots on the ground for a medium to long-term strategy, you'll be in good shape. We are seeing liberalization because of the free trade agreement in these key sectors. One thing that I would like to note is that the free trade agreement provides something called national treatment. And that means U.S. companies now have to be treated as if they were a Colombian company. This is key for you because now, if a Colombian company, let's say, for example, does not require a particular license or a certification to sell their product in Colombia, neither do you. This speeds your access to market and it lowers your cost to market if you don't need those license or certifications. So depending on your product, we're certainly happy to work with you on an individual basis to see what benefits are out there. But again, it's a huge caveat, not just the lowering or elimination of the tariff, but this being treated as a Colombian company is a huge benefit for U.S. companies. So here's some general tips on doing business in Colombia. We have a publication, I'm sorry that I use the acronym, the CCG is a Country Commercial Guide. Margaret and Les can certainly give you access and information on all the products and services that the Commercial Service provides because really they are an invaluable resource. They're right there in your backyard, right there in St. Louis, our U.S. Export Assistance Center. Their job is to help you get not only into Colombia, but whatever market around the world where you might have interest. They can help you identify which markets are best for your products and services. They can put you in touch with us, their colleagues in the overseas market. So they are just an invaluable resource, and they can walk you through the Country Commercial Guide as well. For Colombia, like I said, the national safety and security situation has improved markedly over the last 10 years. You know, one of the things now is just kind of street crime. So you have to use situational awareness. Like I said, we now, Bogota, are on par with New Orleans and Philadelphia. So again, you don't want to be walking around the streets of Bogota wearing all your fancy bling, you know, bringing out wads of cash to pay for the taxi cab driver. Just use sound situational awareness, and you'll be okay. The next point is something that's somewhat unique to Colombia. If you're an experienced exporter, you're probably aware of the denied party banned, the banned entities list, the denied parties list. These are companies in which the U.S. government has prohibitions against doing business with for whatever reason. For Colombia, there is an additional list. It's managed by the Office of Foreign Asset Controls of the Department of Treasury, and it's affectionately known as the Clinton list after Bill Clinton, who initiated this list, and these are targeted companies and individuals who are known or suspected to be involved in the drug trade or laundering of drug money. These are companies that cannot have a bank account in Colombia and whose assets, if any, were seized in the United States. If you are dealing with any party in Colombia that asks you to do business on a cash basis, that should raise major red flags for you, and you definitely will want to check this OFAC list. It's publicly available and searchable on the Department of Treasury website under Office of Foreign Asset Control. And again, our good friends Les and Margaret in the St. Louis USEAC can help you with that as well. I mentioned it before. if you have anything more than a short-term strategy for Colombia, and I would argue this applies just about any foreign market that you're targeting, you really need boots on the ground, eyes and ears on your behalf, looking out for your interest in the country through either an agent, representative, or distributor. We do have programs that can help you find a partner through our Gold Key service or International Partner Search. Again, Les and Margaret can tell you all about these invaluable services. I mentioned the inclusion of an arbitration or mediation clause. Again, I just think to protect yourself, to keep yourself out of court as a first source of dispute resolution is just sound advice. As in anywhere, you want to be familiar with the laws and regulations. They are different from the United States. And as much as I hate to recommend it, you should always get legal advice if you're getting ready to go into a fairly substantial deal or do any type of investment in Colombia. They can be valuable, and there are U.S. law firms as well as very talented Colombian law firms in Bogota and around the country. I mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. Do not take English for granted in Colombia. If you translate your marketing material one time into Spanish, you can hit every country in Latin America other than French Guiana and Brazil. Huge return on your investment. In terms of cultural, we as Americans have a tendency to go straight for the jugular, so to speak. Let's cut through the BS. Let's get right down to business. Here's what I want. Here's what I need. In Colombia, you have a very Latina culture. You certainly, it's casual at first. They want to get to know you. We always advise U.S. companies not to push for the big order right off the bat. Ease into it with smaller orders, build up the trust, build up the relationship, and build up the orders. Again, for a medium to long-term strategy, this is what you want to follow. Again, even within Colombia, cultural nuances, I always like to tell people that on the North Coast in cities like Cartagena and Barranquilla, they play baseball. Very Caribbean in nature and in culture. You would not be caught dead wearing a suit on the North Coast. A, you would sweat to death, but B, it's just not the culture. However, you come down to Bogota, much more formal. I'm wearing a suit right now. So again, even within the country, there are some cultural differences and norms that you'll want to be aware of. Second to last slide. Okay, some helpful websites. The first one, the Colombian government does a very good job of making its public procurement tenders publicly available when they issue them. It is in Spanish. It's a behemoth of a website, and it can take some time to go through it. But once you learn it, it is a very valuable resource tool, and that is the website in the first bullet to find that. Our embassy here also does a job of trying to put up business opportunities that are relevant or we think are relevant. It's kind of like reporting the news. We're reporting the news that we feel is fit to report, but that's another website. And the last website, again, it's so important to know what your tariff rate is. Were you part of the 80% group that had your tariffs eliminated? Were you part of the 20% that you have a phase-in reduction? This website will tell you the answer. All you need is your HTS number. You go to this website, you indicate you're a U.S. exporter, you indicate Colombia is your free trade agreement country of destination, you put in your HTS number, and it will tell you what your duty is, whether it went to zero or whether you have a phase-in reduction. And if you have a phase-in reduction, it'll show you what the phase-in reduction is. So again, in terms of quoting prices, an invaluable tool to be aware of. And I'm going to wrap it up now. However, this is my contact information, also the contact information of the Deputy Nicole De Silva here in my office. We have a team of Colombians that work with us that are actually the industry experts. They are the heart and soul of the office. They are the ones that you want to talk to. I'm fine for these presentations, but I don't know much more than that. So they are really the true talent in the office. And again, it bears repeating that your local U.S. Export Assistance Center, really your first stop and invaluable resource. And I can guarantee you that they speak English. All right, I'm going to stop now and turn it over to Les and open it up for Q&A. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Cameron. And now for the question and answer portion of this program, we refer to Margaret Gottlieb.
We do have one question, and that question is there a quote unquote best time to visit Colombia to do business? For example, in Europe, July and August is often a vacation time, and it's not the best time to go to Europe. Is there a best time to do business in Colombia?
Yeah, that's a very practical question. There are basically two periods of time that you want to avoid in Colombia. One is Christmas. They take it very serious down here, and basically between the third week of December to the middle of January, they are closed. However, if you know Bogota and you want to come when the roads are clear, that's the best time to come, but not the best time to come for business. So that is a time to avoid. It's very difficult to get meetings. It's really very difficult to get anything done. And the second time is over Easter, what they call here in Colombian Spanish, Semana Santa, or Saints Week. Again, that's a one-week holiday, also taken very, very seriously in Colombia and most Catholic countries in Latin America. So again, that is not a set time like Christmas is, but it is Easter. So again, for about a 2-week period, I know they call it Semana Santa, which means just 1 week, but kind of like rush hour, it's more than 1 hour. It's about a 2-week period of time. So around Easter, avoid, and around Christmas, avoid. The rest of the year, it's pretty open. Colombia has no other major holidays. There are a lot of one-day religious holidays throughout the year. But again, in terms of blocks of time, those are the two that I would strongly recommend avoiding. Thank you for that question.
I wanted to remind everybody that our main website for exporting is www.export.gov. And if you have the chance to go and visit that site, you'll find a lot of information in there, including the country commercial guide and that Cameron mentioned. You can find it there for Colombia and other countries as well. You would go to, from the home page, you would hit the Opportunities tab across the top of the page, and from there go to Market Research, and then search the Market Research library, where you could take a look for the country commercial guides and other market research that might be available for you to take a look at. Also on that page, there is a lot of information available. If you go to the bottom, you can get information on certain topics and direct links to the Free Trade Agreements page, which has the Trade Agreement Tariff tool. There are also archived webinars that you may be able to listen to at your own time for your own personal benefit for your exporting endeavors. And there is a search bar at the top right-hand corner of that site that's also very beneficial and useful. It actually works quite well if you don't know where to look for a particular type of topic. You can put in, for example, FTA or CE if you're exporting to Europe, and the links to those relevant pages will come up. Another question here from the Q&A box, and it is there a preferred seaport of entry for distribution in Colombia, and which airport has cold chain capabilities?
Okay, on the seaport, Colombia is unique. It's the only country in South America that actually has 2 coasts. So again, a lot of times will depend on where your customer or your partner is located and where you're located in the United States if you don't want to go through the Panama Canal. So again, on the Pacific coast, the biggest port in Colombia is called Buenaventura. That's the largest port in Colombia. Again, shipping from the west coast of the United States, a direct shot, a quick shot, no going through the Panama Canal to worry about. If you are shipping to cities like Medellin or Cali or Bogota, that's a good port. On the north coast, the 2 primary ports, cities, I should say, are located in Cartagena and Barranquilla. So companies that are shipping from the east coast or the Gulf likely ship to those ports, again, to avoid the Panama Canal, lower your costs. And for shipping to cities like Barranquilla, Cartagena, and Bogota, yes, I listed Bogota there twice because it's kind of in the middle in between both coasts, so either is fine. So I would say, on the whole, we probably see more product coming in from the East Coast, which means a lot of that U.S. product is coming into Cartagena and Barranquilla. Obviously, Florida being a major exporter to Colombia, we see the bulk of that. So there is some value to both ports, and it really depends on cost, where you're shipping from and where you're shipping to. In terms of the airport, the El Dorado Airport in Bogota, it does have the cool system. In fact, they ship out all the roses that are flown to Miami on a nightly basis. A U.S. company, formerly known as Lynx, out of Houston, Texas, actually manages the cargo terminal at the International Airport here in Bogota, and it is fairly state-of-the-art. I've toured it a couple times.
What are the greatest challenges facing Colombia right now that exporters should be aware of?
Once you come into Colombia, this first challenge I'm going to mention is not a challenge, but it's perception. What we find in the education that we're doing, the outreach like we're doing right now to U.S. exporters, is that there's a large amount of uncertainty on behalf of U.S. business about what Colombia is today. That's why I try to make such a point to emphasize the changes that have taken place over the last 10 years in this country. And once companies actually realize the bona fides of the market in Colombia and how open they are and how receptive they are to U.S. products, that challenge falls by the wayside. But I do find that to be a significant challenge, is just the perception, getting U.S. companies to think about Colombia. But once they do think about Colombia, once they come down, once they start doing business, they see that's not the issue. You know, the challenges that I mentioned, I think that the bureaucracy and the red tape, for those companies that are selling to the government, do tend to be a problem. We don't see as much corruption in government procurement as we once did. There has been a real dedicated effort to try to eradicate that. But again, this is an emerging market. And in an emerging market, you will face these issues. So having that local partner on the ground really will help you wade through kind of the mire that is the bureaucracy, the red tape, and potentially corruption. Other challenges, I think that the competition that we're starting to see from other countries, we don't see a lot of competition from local companies that manufacture in Colombia to a great extent, but we are seeing greater challenges from other South American countries like the Chileans and the Brazilians. They're starting to see the benefits of Colombia, so they're coming in here. The Israelis and the French and Spanish also very active, and the Koreans more and more have been getting very active both with sales and investments. So we're seeing the U.S. companies really need to pay attention to the market if you're looking at Colombia and heed the warnings that the competition is really gearing up. So, you know, like most markets, the sooner the better.
Is there paperwork required by the U.S. exporter for the free trade agreement when exporting to Colombia?
You'll be filling out your SED, your shipper's export declaration form, as you would anytime you export. It's probably a good idea to fill out a rules of origin form. If there's any question about the product, if you've got some content you brought from Canada or from other countries, further manufactured in the United States, probably a good idea. It's not required, but it's a good form to have just to avoid any potential problems with customs. But other than that, there actually are no required forms for the FTA itself. If you are, if you're exporting pharmaceutical, medical equipment, things that might need agricultural products, things that might need certifications from the Colombian equivalent of FDA, which is called INVIMA. Those are product specific, but FTA, no.
Are there any obstacles to collect from customers in Colombia, i.e. foreign exchange controls?
No, there's not. Usually you'll be, depending on your customer, you can invoice in dollars or pesos. No foreign currency controls, either by the U.S. government or the Colombian government. Very open and free flow of goods and reimbursements and remittances.
In comparison with Brazil customs, which is notoriously difficult for importers to have their goods cleared, how difficult is it for importers to have their goods cleared in Colombia, and what is the situation with corruption?
Yeah, I would say that on par, regardless of the country, first world or emerging market, customs often is the most corrupt organization that you would be dealing with, unfortunately. It's certainly not the situation in Brazil. Colombia, a much easier market for a lot of reasons than Brazil. In terms of customs, I would say on whole that they do a very good job in terms of moving goods in and out of the port. There are delays. Under the free trade agreement, there are requirements for the Colombian customs to move goods through ports of entry and airports in 7 hours. Right now it's about 24 hours, depending on average. At the ports, it's 2 days, 48 hours. And right now it's about 7 days on average, so we are working with them on technical assistance programs to try to expedite the movement of goods in and out of ports, both seaports and airports. We certainly recommend working with a credible and reliable customs broker and freight forwarder. The Colombian customs can be a bit draconian when they review the paperwork, as many customs agents are, but every T is crossed and I is dotted. There are caveats in the customs law that if there are problems with your paperwork or problems with the product and they hold the product, if you don't resolve the product in a certain amount of time, they can actually nationalize it, which then makes it almost impossible to get back. We have had several instances with U.S. companies that have found themselves in this situation. Obviously, you do not want to find yourself in this situation. So working with a valued partner, customs broker, or make sure that your client, our partner, is working with one is key. But on the whole, we find them to be very confident, very capable. Not too many problems that we have heard with corruption. More it's adhering to the letter of the law that sometimes actually causes more problems than corruption itself.
Can you please repeat which company manages the El Dorado Airport cool chain facilities? I think it was a company out of Houston.
Yeah, I think it's formerly called Lynx, L-Y-N-X, S maybe? Is that? I think it's L-Y-N-X-S. However, that partnership split up, and the gentleman, also an American that took over that part, renamed it Acero, which in Colombian, in Spanish means steel. Still a U.S. company. Lynx operates other airports, but in Colombia, it's a U.S. partner called Acero.
Les, I'll turn it back over to you to conclude our program.
Thank you, Margaret and Cameron. This concludes this program. With the reminder to watch our other videos in this series, and feel free to contact the U.S. Commercial Service for any further information. Contact information can be found off the main page of export.gov. Near the top of the page is a tab for locations. Select domestic or international to find your local office. Thank you.